So a little while ago I made a video on TBC preparation for when we eventually get TBC Classic, and I've had a few comments on there asking for all sorts of information with regards to what we are going to be getting with the release of TBC, when it's going to be coming, how it's going to be introduced, things like that. And I'll put some example up on the screen here for you, and it feels rather bad that there aren't answers to give you, unfortunately, for most of the questions that I'm being asked. Simply the information doesn't exist yet. But when I was reading some of these, I did realise that there's nothing stopping me from trying to figure things out. So I thought I'd bring this video out today where we speculated on when we are going to be getting TBC and try and use some rationale and some evidence as to why I think that we'll be getting it when we do. If this video does rather well, then I may well make one on other forms of TBC information and how we can try and predict those as well. So if that's something you're interested in, please do let me know down in the comments below, and or give this video a like, just so I know it is something that you are interested in. But today we're starting this off with when are we getting TBC? Now, the first thing that I want to make abundantly clear, if it isn't already, is that this is speculation. We are going to be looking at some evidence and some logics as to why I think that we'll be getting it when this video says that we will. But at the end of the day, Blizzard can simply just do it whenever they want. We haven't even had it confirmed that we're getting it yet. So if they decide that they want to rush it out and bring it out 2 weeks from now, that's entirely their prerogative. I really doubt that. But until they confirm anything, we don't know for sure. Secondly, we are going to be speculating off of evidence for this, but the evidence that we're going to be using is what evidence there is available to us. So if the evidence seems as though it is not the right information to use, or that perhaps it's incomplete, that is because that's all the evidence that we have. So do bear that in mind. Please also do be aware that the date of this recording is the 23rd of August 2020, and as a result, if you are watching this later, obviously you may well have more information than what I have available here, so do bear that in mind if anything I say sounds a little bit, well, stupid, because what's hindsight for you is future sight for me at this point. So, the methodology, what we're actually doing in this video. We're going to be taking a look at the release date of WoW Classic and Vanilla WoW, and then looking at all of the patches that came out for Vanilla WoW that introduced the same main features as their equivalent phase release in WoW Classic, and looking at the time that it took between the equivalent patches to the phases to try and predict the rate of progression for WoW Classic and how it compares to Vanilla back in the day. From this, once we get that information, we can try and then extrapolate outwards to find what we can expect going forward in terms of the release date for TBC. It's at this point that I would like to also mention that by extension of trying to predict TBC's release date, we are also going to be looking at the release of Naxx, simply because in order to figure out when we're getting TBC, we're going to need to figure out when we're going to get the next patch as well. Now, because of how patches worked in Vanilla WoW, not all of the patch content that we got back then is the exact same as what we get in a phase release in WoW Classic. So we are going to be looking primarily at the main feature from the phase release in WoW Classic and finding the patch that brought in the equivalent feature to Vanilla. So, with that being said, let's dive into it. So I'm just going to throw all this information up on the screen for you now, and then we'll have a quick talk through it. I know this is going to be quite a lot to take in at first, but let me break it down with you. So, first off, on the left hand side, we have WoW Classic. We have the release date for WoW Classic, and then the release date for each patch that came that brought us the phases with the new content. On the right hand side, we have Vanilla WoW. We have the patch equivalent that brought us, or at least the closest patch equivalent to that phase, for the main feature, and it is also showing the release dates for those as well. Now in blue is the number of days between the phase and or patch release equivalent for both WoW Classic and WoW Vanilla. Now these numbers and how they compare are what we're going to be looking at in order to calculate where we're going to be going forward. Now, the first thing that we're going to notice, or at least that stands out to me here, is going to be Phase 2 and patch 1.3 respectively. Now, this is noteworthy for two reasons. First of all, the first thing that you're going to notice is a rather large disparity in the number of days between Phase 2 and Phase 3 and patch 1.3 and 1.6. Now, I want to make this clear that that is as close of a patch as we could have to Phase 2, which is where there's the biggest disparity in terms of what we got in content in WoW Classic and what we got originally in Vanilla WoW. The Honor System and World Bosses were introduced as the main features of Phase 2, and those two features were brought in separate patches originally, which can affect the numbers, which is again why this is speculation and not necessarily fact, because you could look at patch 1.3 where we got the World Bosses, or you could look at an alternate patch where we got the Honor System. Simultaneously, Phase 2 actually released sort of staggered with certain features in WoW Classic coming at different dates to try and help relieve some of the problems that they were having in WoW Classic. So again, that is why all of this is speculation. Now, as we look at the phases and compare the numbers from left to right, what you're going to probably notice is that there is somewhat of a disparity. However, it seems to be front-loaded in that the release to Phase 2 and again onto Phase 3 were significantly different to what the patch equivalent was in Vanilla WoW. But when we go from Phase 3 to Phase 4 and Phase 4 to Phase 5, they are the exact same number of days or just 1 week more respectively, which means that we're pretty much on par for keeping with the same rate of progression as what we were back in Vanilla WoW. Now, that is not particularly surprising to me, and we're going to talk a little bit now as to why. So that was our results that we found. Now, what that table of results actually means to us basically boils down to this. If you look at a direct comparison from WoW Classic to WoW Vanilla, there is quite a high variance on the potential amount of time that you are going to be taking from one patch to another when you look back at what it was originally. However, this is probably due to the fact that we are pretty much exclusively looking at raid releases, and that means that it can somewhat skew the data because the phase releases are somewhat more bulkier in terms of what we get compared to the more numerous and less all-encompassing patches that you got 16 years ago. As a result, it means that you have to select a date, and as a result, most people see that the raids that come in the phases and in the patches are going to be the primary content, and that's why we looked to view the raids as what we were choosing for our patches for this video, as opposed to looking at any other particular piece of content. If you were to do so, you could get slightly different numbers, and that could have an effect on the calculations that you make. Feel free to do that if that is something that you would like to do. Also on that front, when it comes to the very first patch, the release and things of that nature for Vanilla, these numbers are also potentially skewed because I am working from the numbers for the North American release. Now, obviously, the WoW Classic that we know today has all of its localizations and releases worldwide to be simultaneous. This was not the case when it came out originally 16 years ago, and Blizzard spent a lot of time working on localizations and getting things to work around the globe, and as a result, it could well be that that delayed the content that you got in North America because they were primarily working on getting those releases out in other parts of the world, and if you use the release dates that other parts of the world got, you may well have it be closer together in patch release to what we got for WoW Classic. The next up, what I'm only going to lightly touch on, is the variance is front-loaded. Now, again, that is for the reasons that I've just discussed and what I discussed earlier in the video, so we're not going to go too much on that. But that means going forward, it is likely that the variance is going to be much lower if my logics for the reasons as to why we had that variance early are true and not something that I am misinterpreting. Now, The final thing I want to say is the overall number of days. Now, the overall number of days actually works out to be almost exactly 80% of the time in Classic compared to Vanilla. So if that is the intent to have the content work that way, then it is potential that going forward we could be looking at 80% of the time in each given patch before we get the next one compared to what we were going forward. Or of course, like we saw with the last two patches, it could be that we're going to have this release almost exactly the same as what we had with the original game 16 years ago. So going forward, when we're just about to show you my predictions for what we're going to have, we are going to be looking at both of those circumstances, looking at the time of release for Naxx and TBC if we were to get both the 80% runtime of any given patch, and also if we were to stick to the original vanilla schedule. So let's get those numbers up on screen for you now. So here we have it, my predictions for when we're going to get both Naxxramas and the Burning Crusade. Now, on the top in red, we have what my timeframes are predicting if we get the mirror of the original release. Now this I've put in red because it's my least favourite of the options. However, it is the one that I believe is probably more likely. And as a result, it comes out that following the release that we had on, I believe it was the 28th of July for AQ, then we are going to be looking at 168 days from that day before we get Naxxramas. That brings us out on January 12th, 2021. Now again, if we move that forward to Burning Crusade from the original dates that we had, it would be another 210 days from original Naxx patch day to Burning Crusade. So from our prediction of January 12th and adding on the 210 days, that takes us to August 10th, 2021. Now, the first takeaway that I have from this is that, first of all, when I remember going backwards, and admittedly it's 16 years and I am only 28, so I will have been 12, so my memory could well be skewed, I seem to remember that the release of the TBC expansion wasn't 210 days from the release of Naxxramas. Now I may be wrong, and I hope I am for the sake of this video, and every piece of information I found online is telling me that it's 210 days. But it is something that has come up a lot over the years, that a lot of people didn't really do Naxxramas because of the fact that they all saw TBC right around the corner. Now, if that's the case, it has been said many times that Blizzard have looked at it and sort of wished that they didn't have that patch be so early because of the fact that Naxxramas was content that basically didn't get done, and that was part of why it got re-released in Wrath of the Lich King. So if Blizzard are willing to adapt and change what their release schedule is based off what they think is best for the game, as opposed to sticking to everything being exactly the same for nostalgia, which so far through WoW Classic we have seen that they've tried to keep things exactly the same, but have been willing to adapt when required. So it is something of an ambivalent statement that we're going to be looking at here. Then we could well see that 210 days brought down quite dramatically. But one other thing that we need to take away from this, of course, is that if they elect to bring this game out without getting rid of the classic servers, which I think is extremely likely, then of course they can play with this release date as much as they would like, because the WoW Classic game wouldn't be going anywhere. So there's no reason why they couldn't bring it out when they believe that the majority of the player base that's playing Naxxramas will be bored and want to move on, whereas still maintaining the Naxxramas patch for those that want to stick in WoW Classic indefinitely. Now onto my preferable way that this is done, and that is if we do get the 80% overall time average of the original content release compared to WoW Classic. Now, that would mean that we would be looking at 134 days, i.e. 80% of the 168 days that we had from AQ release, and that means that we would get Naxxramas before the end of this calendar year, looking at December 9th, 2020. That would then, by extension, mean that we had both an earlier start date for our shorter length of time before we got our Burning Crusade release. Now, I am somewhat biased in wanting this because Burning Crusade is really what I'm looking forward to. I did enjoy WoW Classic and I did enjoy the game originally 16 years ago, but Burning Crusade is when I really fell in love with the game. So getting that 168 days from that December 9th Naxx release from this time schedule would put us at May 26th, 2021, and that doesn't seem too far away at all for me, which is definitely my preference for what we are going to have looking forward. Now, then, just like I've said before when discussing the worst case scenario from my point of view, is that this is subject to change, and I think one of the biggest factors that's dictating how accurate these predictions are going to be is going to be the way in which the Burning Crusade is delivered to us. I think that if they intend on bringing out Burning Crusade servers without the removal of the classic servers, it will greatly vary the release time of the Burning Crusade. Speaking of, if you guys do enjoy this video and you do want me to continue with this TBC speculation, then do let me know down below, but just so that you are aware, the next one that I would be looking to make would be speculation on what way we would have the Burning Crusade delivered to us, as that seems to be a popular question for people. It is one that would be far more speculative with probably less evidence, and it certainly would be quite a bit more anecdotal evidence as to what way it would be delivered, because at this moment in time we simply don't have that information. But I do think there are ways in which that we could extrapolate some sort of information to try and predict somewhat what way we would get TBC delivered to us, and if that's something you'd be interested in me taking a look at, then let me know down below. But for now guys, thanks for watching, that's going to be it for this one. I do hope you enjoyed the video, and I do hope that you subscribe to the channel. But for now guys, hope to see you in the next one. Later.